What up, brawlers? Welcome back to Throwin Hands. And we got a good episode today. Daniel's here, but we have MMA junkies John Morgan on. John, how are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me, guys.
Of course, of course. And on Throwin Hands, we always start off with, how'd you get your start in journalism in your career?
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I mean, I was always like very involved in sports as a kid, and it was decent, I guess, but realized that at one point in time, look, hey, I'm not going to be a professional athlete. That's certainly not going to happen. But I still wanted to be involved in sports, and I loved writing. And I'm a little bit older in my mid 40s here. So this is back in the day when you could actually be just a writer. Now you got to do multimedia everything. But yeah, it was like, man, I want to do sports writing. I think that'd be great. So I went to school for that. Didn't do it for a long time because I ended up putting myself through school in the restaurant business and ended up making more money in the restaurant business for a while, but got to a point where I was just like, man, I didn't want to do this. I'm cool with it. I'm happy with it. What I wanted to do was be a sports writer. And so reached a point where I was like, let's just give it a shot. Let's walk away from the restaurant business, roll the dice. And I'd always been passionate about MMA, man. I was an MMA adopter from the very beginning. The first UFC I ever attended was UFC 16 way back in the day. I'd watched from the start and wanted to be involved in that and gave it a shot, took a chance, got an internship with MMA Junkie, and that turned from free work to part-time to full-time. And here we are 15 years later.
What about MMA when you were first getting started was so appealing about it? What made this what you wanted to make a career out of?
It's funny. I mean, I honestly never thought about it as a career in the beginning. It was just something I liked. I mean, heck, in the beginning, it wasn't an industry, the way it is now. It was just a spectacle. And it's funny, man, when you go back and watch like the early UFCs, you go back and watch like UFC 1, UFC 2, it's like, this stuff is brutal, man. Like what did I like about it? But what I always did like was just the pureness of the competition. I mean, I always liked martial arts to a degree, but until Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu came around, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, we all thought karate was superior, striking arts, that sort of thing. It was actually Muay Thai was something that I really liked at a young age. So I like the pureness of that competition. I mean, stick and ball sports are fun. I played them all growing up, baseball, basketball, soccer, and soccer is still probably my second favorite sport, to be honest with you. But the pureness of it, man, it's one-on-one competition. That's it, man. There's nobody to blame that played the position wrong, their teammate, whatever. No. It's on you. You're the one that's got to get out there and do it. And then there's something about there that really appealed to me, and people, taking the time to study all these arts and to be willing to get in there and compete.
So you get into the business about 15 years ago. How has content evolved in the MMA world? Because, things you can now monetize anything, it seems like. So how has content evolved from when you started about 15 years back to now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a night and day, man. It's not even the same thing anymore. Like I said, like, when I joined, I just liked writing. I like telling stories. I mean, it's funny. That's the part of it that I was most passionate about. And it's probably what I do least of today, to be honest with you, is writing. Now everything is obviously skewed towards, video and bringing people there, which I like. I mean, I think it's cool because, certainly you get to see people and you get to hear from them directly. You don't have to wait to go through, a writer's words and that sort of thing. But yeah, everything is geared around like multimedia stuff at this point, audio, video, especially social media, you get that all the time. Hey, let's make it short. Let's make it quick. Let's shorten it down a little bit. So yeah, it's night and day from where it was. You used to be able to be a specialist. Like I said, I mean, I got into this because I wanted to be a sports writer. You can't do that anymore. Now you got to be a sports writer, a podcast host, a video editor, on-camera personality. I mean, you got to do everything. So it's night and day now.
So what are some of your best experiences that you've had covering the UFC over the past 15 years?
Oh man, I've been so fortunate, man. I've obviously this past year has been really interesting. I mean, it's been dealing with sports and COVID. It's pretty, I guess in some ways it's cool to be able to document something that's truly historical. You know what I mean? Sometimes I like to joke about, what sports media really does on a day-to-day basis. I mean, for the most part, we cover a game. But this was really interesting, this past year, being on the edge, being in Jacksonville, Florida, and seeing the UFC being the first professional sports organization back, and seeing how they handled everything. And then, of course, the trips to Fight Island, and that whole experience was just insane. That stuff was pretty interesting and cool in a certain way, but it's also like been kind of scary, you know what I mean? Obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so it's intriguing to see, but obviously, we're out there when the recommendation is to be quarantined. So it's been, kind of a double-edged sword. But before that, back before the pandemic, man, I had been fortunate to travel all over the world. Some of the, the rowdy crowds down in Brazil, man, the "O Vai Morrer" chants and the passion there, and get an opportunity to see, the big stadium shows that we had been to all around the world, going over to the Far East. I mean, going to Saitama Super Arena for the first time was big for me. Man, I've been fortunate to see a lot of cool things and take part in events all over the world.
So with multimedia, as you mentioned, there had to be a lot of a transition for you, because you said when you started out, all you wanted to be was a writer. That's all you wanted to do. What was that transition like, having to pick up, on-air speaking skills and video skills and all of that? What was that process like for you? How long did that transition take? And how do you think you've grown from it since then?
Yeah, man, grown tremendously, to be honest with you. I guess the first part would be, we hesitated for a long time at MMA Junkie to launch video, to be honest. We were a little slow in getting into the video game. Our founder, Dan Stupp, who's no longer with the company, but he was our leader for a long time. And he and I worked together a lot, and we wanted to do it right. I mean, we knew we had to get into video at some point, but we also didn't want to be, the handy cam in the hallway with crap lighting and the picture shaking and the audio, being crap. And so, we were kind of slow to adopt it because neither one of us really knew anything about it. And eventually we were able to bring on some videographers and some resources that have helped us. Ken Hathaway now, who used to work for the UFC actually, and is also my podcast co-host. He heads our video efforts now. And I mean, he's got, multiple thousands of dollars worth of gear and has taught us and helped outfit us with like basic stuff. So, just learning the mechanics of it was tough. And then we got to a point where, I wanted to learn how to edit it and stuff myself, because I would travel out on the road and maybe I'd go shoot weigh-ins, or maybe I'd go shoot some press conferences, or maybe I'd shoot some interviews or whatever. And then I'd have to upload that footage back to Kenny or to somebody else to process all the footage. And I realized like how slow that process was, especially if you're on kind of a bad internet connection, which you can be when you travel around the world. So then I wanted to learn, how to edit it myself. And I'd never done anything like that in my life. And now it's one of the things I do most. So it's rewarding in a lot of ways, because I feel like I've gained a lot of skills and I feel like I know all the aspects of it, but it's challenging. Just photography, like weigh-in photography. I mean, it's silly. I mean, you can use a lot of automatic settings, but over the years, learning how to, get the coloring right, to get, to take some pride in the way those images look, because we use that art that we take, those weigh-in shots. For the longest time, we didn't have action photography. Now, through USA Today, once they purchased us in 2011, we have access to event photography. But used to kind of those weigh-in images and press conference images were all we had. So I found it very rewarding. It's been challenging. The on-air stuff, I like. I say I like it. I like calling fights. There's something I've started to do a lot more is calling fights. I call Cage Fury Fighting Championships on UFC Fight Pass. I've done Tough Enough here in Las Vegas, and I really, really enjoy that. I don't know. I've never been like the on camera. I want to be the guy holding the microphone. I don't know. I never wanted to do that, but got to do what you got to do. So it's been fun. Overall, I found it very rewarding to kind of learn all those different roles. I feel like it's, kind of bettered me in my knowledge of the industry.
Speaking of, the roles, COVID hit, what challenges have you faced with COVID, trying to refine your roles in different types of media?
Man, it's been tough. Like the thing that's really been hard for me, that's really been noticeable, and we don't get it on Fight Island. It's awesome. At Fight Island, we actually get to do in-person interviews, which is phenomenal. But I don't know how much you guys have seen it, but the UFC switched to like these virtual media days. And, first of all, just the quality of them isn't great. And I feel like the product that we put out isn't fantastic. I mean, we're kind of relying on the UFC's webcam and the UFC's audio, and we can't control any of that. So if their lighting happens to be off or their audio happens to be off, I mean, there's nothing we can do about it, or the internet connection is bad. you're just stuck with it. You know what I mean? So my understanding is this year the UFC is going to try to move back to live media days. But to me, that's been a challenge just from the product quality. But it's also been a challenge too of like, man, you used to have that insight. You were there on fight week, and you'd be around the fighters, or you'd be around the camps, you'd be around the teams, and man, you really start to know somebody, and you pick up on kind of like nonverbal cues, and you can really see like, ooh, man, look at that energy level. It's not where it normally is, man. I wonder if he's having a little bit of a rough weight cut, or man, why is he kind of in a little bit different mood than what we're normally used to seeing him. And so the past year where we haven't really had direct contact with the athletes or direct contact with the teams and that sort of thing, I found it to be a lot more challenging to give people, kind of some insight or some, behind the scenes stuff of things that I've seen with my own eyes. Sure, I can say, well, this coach told me X, Y, and Z. I can relay that information on, but the things that you used to pick up on with your own eyes have been a struggle in the COVID era.
That's a really interesting point you make, because I think it's unique with the UFC and combat sports, really, with that, where if you're in a press conference for, say, an NFL team, you've just got the coach up there, and you can't tell from what the coach is telling you if the quarterback who twisted his ankle the week before is really okay, or if that questionable tag really means something. But in combat sports and MMA, you can really tell, like you said, from guys' energy levels, how was that developing the eye for that kind of thing and picking up those kind of cues? What goes into that, and what went into that in your career?
It's funny, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, all those things are a little bit intangibles. And if you get caught with the right hand, even if you had the best training camp and the most energy of your life and all that, like, you're still going out. So it's always intriguing to me, like, how much stock you've been into it. But look, I think that's an important thing as a reporter. I mean, there are some very serious stories in the sport, things about like drug use and, things of that nature that are real stories to follow. But for the rest, we're covering a sport, right? We're covering a game, a very intense game, and a game in which people put their physical bodies on the line. But those are just observations that you make through repetition. I mean, the first time you interview somebody, you don't know, but after you've interviewed somebody 5 times, 10 times, in the case of a Cowboy Cerrone, I mean, how many times I've interviewed Cowboy Cerrone in his career? 30 times, 40 times? I don't know. I mean, I've been in front of him a lot, and you just start to pick up on those things. That's your observation as a journalist, right? Is kind of what you're seeing and reading through the lines a little bit and getting the quotes. And the other thing that's amazing about mixed martial arts, especially in a non-COVID time, is just the access that we have to everybody is unparalleled in any other sport. Like you said, in the NFL, the players aren't walking around the lobby of the host hotel and kind of rubbing elbows with you and having little side conversations here and there, and that does happen in mixed martial arts, even with the UFC. Now, maybe not the very highest level. Conor McGregor is going to be in a private area of a hotel, on his own floor, probably in a private hotel onto himself, or a Mac mansion that he's rented, or that sort of thing. So I mean, there are exceptions to that rule. But for the most part, man, the accessibility during non-COVID times is phenomenal in mixed martial arts.
So a week ago, they brought back one of the live pressers with the ceremonial weigh-ins and stuff, and the press conference the day before that. Was it refreshing getting back to that after so many virtual press conferences and stuff like that?
Yeah, it was great. I hadn't been booed from the crowd in a long time, so I got to experience that when I asked Conor McGregor about the lawsuit that he was facing and if it was distracting from him on fight week. So yeah, that was super refreshing to get booed again. But no, it really was, man. Like you said, the energy of the ceremonial weigh-ins, man, that big stage. I mean, the big presentation that the UFC puts in. It's cool because we've just been doing these face-offs in essentially like a boardroom, you know what I mean? There's no, it's you get that final image, which is nice, of the two fighters facing off, but you don't really get the pageantry and the electricity and the energy, and we got that again. So that was nice. And yeah, having fans back was fantastic. It really was. I've seen a little bit of it. I mentioned the CFSC shows that I do on Fight Pass, and a couple of our most recent shows, we've been able to have only like 150 fans in the building, but it's kind of a smaller building. And so it echoes pretty loud, and you can hear them, especially because they're cheering for their teammates and their family members. They're not just fans. These are people that they really, really know and are really, really connected to. And MMA has been interesting because there are certain aspects of it that I wouldn't say are better without fans, but are just unique and intriguing without fans, right? Like when we first started having these fanless events, and you could really hear the coaches, clearly, and both team, you could hear both coaches. So now all of a sudden everybody had to really be careful and start speaking in a lot more codes. Some teams always use codes, but pretty much everybody had to shift to codes because they realized, oh, my opponent's hearing exactly what's being told. Even, the instructions in the corner in between rounds. Normally, you might want to fire your guy up a little bit. You might want to, have some big energy in front of them. Now you have to keep your voice down and keep it kind of quiet, because you don't want the adjustments to be heard on the other side of the cage. So that's been interesting. Hearing the commentators, seeing the interaction between the commentators and the fighters has been amazing. I mean, hearing the weight of the blows, man, like when you can really hear a strike, and you're no longer just seeing it, but you can hear the weight of it. I mean, all that's been great. But the energy that the fans bring is something special. I mean, I think back to, the last fight before the pandemic hit. And the main event that night was Adesanya Romero. It wasn't that great, but you think back to that amazing Zhang Weili, Ioane, and Jacek fight, man. What an incredible fight that was. And, man, the energy in the building, the buzz that the fans brought to that, it would have been a great fight without fans. But, man, the sound that erupted at the end of every single round, the buzz that was in the air, like after they go 5 hard rounds, and you're like, man, who got it? Did she do enough? I don't know. You can hear, you literally hear the buzz, people trying to figure it out. I miss that. I'm looking forward to that being back. It was great to have 2,000, 2,600 in the building the other night for the Conor McGregor fight. And those 2,600, they were as loud as they could, but I'm anxious to get back to that sold out 18,000, just big fight feel.
As fight commentary, live fight commentary has become more of a part of your career. How did that opportunity present itself to you, and how did you get into that and make that a big part of what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's happened on and off over the years. And I've done it for a long time here in Vegas at an amateur show called Tough Enough, which is a phenomenal amateur show here in Vegas. They actually signed a deal with Fight Pass for 2021. So I'm excited to see them get that shine. But I've done a little bit of it here and there over the years. And then actually a couple years back, I did a few shows for Titan FC out in Florida. And Kamaru Usman was actually my broadcast partner, and we had a great time and things were going really well. And then unfortunately, management at the time decided to enforce in my contract that it was a conflict of interest. So I had to give it up for a couple years, which was a bummer. It was a bummer. And the way it started, I think, was just, there was some local shows and I mean, they know that I know this full time and that I do this and they're like, hey, would you like to come commentate? And it starts out as, kind of like some little small gigs here and there, and you just start to build up the resume. Next thing you know, you're getting some invites from the bigger shows. And that, fortunately, I've been able to work out the contract details with my employers, and now I'm able to do it. I just have to be careful with the scheduling and make sure it doesn't conflict with any of our UFC event coverage. But it had a lot of fun, and that opportunity has been great. And that was facilitated by Dave Schaller, who used to be a UFC PR guy. Went to go work for the Philadelphia 76ers and was actually working with CFFC for a while. So he's the one that actually put that broadcast team together. It's me and CM Punk there. So man, just the more repetitions you get, the more chances you get to do it, kind of opens some more doors, and hopefully more in the future, man. It's something I really enjoy. And, I think you need variety in your job. I think that's part of it too. I mean, I enjoy calling the fights, but I just think too, like, I love my job as a mixed martial arts reporter. Don't get me wrong. Not complaining one bit. I love it. And on fight night, there's no place I'd rather be. But, you do the same job for 15 years. You want a little variety, right? You want to change things up a little bit. So I think that's kind of a big part of it too, is just, kind of another evolution in my role.
And speaking of evolution, how has you looking at fights and reporting on fights changed since you've been a commentator?
Yeah, it's interesting, man. The way you see things. I mean, it's funny, like what you can share and what you can't share when you're in a writing role versus, the commentators have really direct access to the fighters. And when they're talking to you about things, they're very open about, because they trust you, right? About game plans and about, things that may be bothering them, because, we're asking, what can we look for? What can we expect? How do we know things are going your way? That sort of thing. And they'll give us insight, and it's insight that they'd never give you as a reporter, because they're like, wait, you don't need to know that. What are you getting out on a MMA Junkie? Like, no, absolutely not. But when they know you're part of the broadcast team, and they understand that it just helps kind of us enhance what we're able to do in the broadcast. It's unique. So it is fun because you start to see that extra layer of the fighter that maybe they weren't always willing to show you as a reporter, and you get to see that behind the scenes. As far as the fight themselves, I still stay pretty true to, I think, the action that I always have, in what I've seen. But it's kind of cool to see that extra layer of the competitive athletes behind the scenes.
So, couple questions. Just a kind of a complete switch up, I guess here. One, why the blue polo at events? And two, why do you always get the first question?
Yeah, the blue polo was kind of an accidental tradition. But when my son was very, very young, my wife just happened to send a picture of him. I was at press row, and I just happened to be wearing a blue shirt that night. And she sent me a picture of my son touching the TV, like where I was with my blue shirt on. And I was like, I'm going to wear a blue shirt every fight night so that when I'm out of town, when I'm gone, that my son can find me on TV. You can just look for the blue shirt right away and go, there's my dad. And I never thought anybody would notice. I mean, in retrospect, I guess it's like, well, dude, you're basically on TV at every single event, every weekend. Yeah, people are going to notice, but it was really just something for me and my son so that he would be able to find me, when I was away from home. And now it's just kind of become tradition. Now it's like my little avatar or whatever on social media, because I think it's kind of funny. But it started just as me and my son. And the first question thing was kind of similar, to be honest. When we used to do these big press conferences, and we don't do quite as many of them anymore, but we would do these big press conferences. It basically just started as a mechanical, because like Dana would get up to the front and be like, "Hey, who's got the first question?" And PR, we'd all put our hands in the air, and PR would have microphones, and they'd go, "Oh, okay, here you go," and they'd pass the microphone down. There was just like this uncomfortable silence, and there was a couple times where Dana would even be like, "What? Nobody has any questions? Nobody has anything to ask?" It's like, "No, we do. We're just trying to get a damn microphone. Like, hang on." So finally one day, Dave Schaller, who actually I mentioned earlier, he was like, "Hey," he's like, "that just whole weird, uncomfortable scrambling period. They're like, is it cool if I just hand you a microphone and you just start the press conference off?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course, absolutely." And so it just kind of started as that. And then I think, doing things for 15 years, all of a sudden, you just start going, "Wow, that's just the way we do it." John opened up the press conference. So it started out as kind of just a silly little mechanical thing. And I think at this point, it's kind of tradition, I guess. I mean, I don't, not my place to say it's tradition, but everybody seems okay with it. So we go with it.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us here. Where can people find you on social media, John?
Yeah, definitely. I'm not the greatest all the time, but hit me up at Twitter at MMA Junkie John. I try to get back to everybody, but I just get swamped sometimes. I'm also John Morgan MMA on Instagram as well, and check out the podcast, the MMA Roadshow, if you haven't listened to it before. Me and my man Ken Hathaway, aka Cold Coffee, we usually sit down, just have a few frosty beverages. It was the MMA Roadshow because it seemed like we were on the road every week covering UFC events. It's a lot of the MMA home show these days with COVID-19, but we're still giving you some behind the scenes and sharing some of our experiences of covering MMA.
Well, John, I'd like to thank you for coming on. Daniel and I both appreciate it very much.
No worries. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, and we'll see you guys next time.